So there's a new look at Supergirl, and already there's a little bit of confusion. But let's get to the non-controversial part. So as we can see, it is confirmed we're going to have Michael Keaton as Batman in the new Flash movie. The photos show he's very prominent. So apparently we are getting the Burton Batman back. He's just a little older. But now let's jump into the alleged controversy, which is, well, what is this exactly? I think probably most people think Supergirl is Kara, right? And we've seen that version of Kara in numerous places, such as the Supergirl movie, Smallville, the CW Supergirl. So, what is this exactly? Because this doesn't look like that Kara. Well, there are several possibilities. One is this is not Kara, the cousin of Superman. This is Laura, who is the daughter of an alternative version of Superman and Lois Lane. So this is not Kara, this is Laura. And that's what we're looking at. Laura in the comics wears this kind of costume. So there may be a little bit of confusion because there are multiple Supergirls in the comics. And because of the Snyder Cut, spoilers, the Flash did time travel. And it seems clear Flash is going to be concentrating on alternative timelines, the multiverse. So this may not be Kara as Supergirl, but a different version of Supergirl. And we're looking at something that's going to happen where maybe she's plucked from her universe, or in this universe, we don't get Kara, we get Laura. So hopefully that'll clear up that controversy. But then we have the issue of the costume itself and the lack of a skirt. Now, it is true for most of Supergirl's existence. Even until the 90s, she did usually wear the skirt. It's not a rule. Sometimes she did do a different costume. But again, her regular costume was the skirt costume. And they even follow this in the CW. But you had to be cautious here because with Smallville, and that pretty well followed the comics in terms of how Kara looked in her origin, she didn't really have a costume. And insofar as she wore a skirt, it was really towards the end of the entire series. Usually her costume was short shorts or jeans. So she didn't really have the skirt either. But again, she looked more like the traditional Kara, which was also played by Helen Slater in the Supergirl film. So it's kind of a myth that she has to have the skirt all the time. She has changed her costume depending on the situation. But again, usually Kara is tall, blonde, and has a skirt, and that's usually the iconic image. But again, Supergirl has changed, and if you follow the comics, they actually radically changed her quite a few times. We'll have to wait for more details, but it could be this is actually much closer to the comics than people suspect. And then we get to the final part of it. It's like, okay, fine, the costume is what it is if this is this version of Supergirl, but it doesn't look feminine, and they seem to be de-emphasizing that. And some people brought up Buffy as a good example of what they should have done. Well, I'm going to put my Buffy expert hat on and say those are radically different situations, so it's not a good comparison because with Buffy as a Slayer, and this is how they constructed the universe in the Buffyverse, this is how Joss Whedon wrote it. In Sunnydale, usually Buffy did not encounter threats that necessitated her wearing a costume and or body armor. She didn't even wear anything to hide her identity, right? We always saw her face. Now, how is this possible given that Buffy is essentially a superhero, right? She did play basically a superhero on Buffy. I don't know. Again, that's the world of Sunnydale, and except for about 2 cases, she pretty much remained in Sunnydale as soon as she got there. So she almost never left Sunnydale. Her basic existence was Sunnydale until the very end in the final episode where she finally can leave Sunnydale. So it's really not a good comparison. I do agree that Buffy was more feminine in her clothing and the way they framed her. But again, that's the way they constructed that universe, right? It's supposed to work with Sunnydale, with the kind of demons and level of threats she faces, where, again, in her weird case, she doesn't wear a costume, she doesn't need a secret identity. Again, that's just the world they constructed for Buffy, so she could look that way, because, again, that's how they framed that mythology. But it seems, for lack of a better term, this is working within the, quote, real world. Obviously, this is all mythology. However, it seems like they don't have that exception, right? It's not like this whole town is constructed just for Supergirl or this whole city. She's going to have to work with, quote, a real universe because, as we saw with BVS and Man of Steel, the villains here pull out big lasers and big guns. Buffy faced those kinds of enemies here and there, but that was very rare. For the most part, she never faced enemies at that level where she needed body armor. But again, they constructed a kind of different thing from the DCEU, and they are moving a little bit away from the Snyderverse, so it's going to be unclear the kind of threat level or how she should, quote, take on people. But if so, then the suit is kind of functional. But we've got to wait to see because, again, we still need more details. I can only say that there's been a lot of misinformed commentary on why does, quote, Supergirl look like this. She doesn't look like Supergirl at all. She doesn't look like the Kara Supergirl, that's true, but she does look like Supergirl, again, of a different sort. But we have to wait to be clarified. Is this Kara and a different version of Kara, or is this Laura? If it is Laura, it is actually very close to the comics, so there's no need to panic. But that's my opinion. All right, thanks for listening.